Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another episode of the Disney Newsreel. So I only picked out a couple of stories because I wanted to try to keep this as short as possible, since this is coming out so late, and because one of the stories I picked is kind of related to some other stories that are just kind of ongoing. Wasn't a lot of positive things that happened that I could find. But you know, that's just kind of where we're at this point. So before I get into the news for today, make sure that if you're not subscribed to the channel, you hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you leave us a like and a comment, and let us know if you find any more uplifting or more positive and optimistic news stories coming out of the Disney parks, because we would like to read those as opposed to all the depressing ones. With that, the first story that I have is analyst claims Disneyland California Resort has lost $2.2 billion in revenue since COVID-19 closure. And this is completely believable. I mean, Disneyland California has been closed since March, so about 7 months now that they've been closed. Disney World in Florida was closed from March to July, so they were only closed for 3 months, and they still lost a ton of money. So you can only imagine how much money Disneyland California lost. And so this analyst has been looking at it and looked at how much revenue Disneyland Resort will generally generate over the course of any given number of months, and then kind of extrapolated that and figured out then how much money, since they're literally getting zero, but they still have expenditures because they're still paying the healthcare of all of their employees while the pandemic was ongoing and while the furloughs were going, and taking off all those expenditures and everything. He has found that they lost somewhere in the ballpark area of $2.2 billion just in Disneyland California. So for those of you who don't know, the downtown Disney district, which is like the shopping area in Disney World, it's called Disney Springs now. It used to be downtown Disney when I went there years ago. But that has opened up, but nothing else has. And the problem with that is that downtown Disney is pretty much exclusively third-party sellers. It's a lot of random shops that don't just pay rent to Disney, and that's it. So that's, at this point, is the only kind of profit that Disney is pulling in is those restaurants and shops and stuff paying rent. That's it. But there are still some Disney cast members who work at downtown Disney. They're not all hired by the third party. Some of them are Disney cast members and are paid by Disney and are working. So, let's see. So the analyst looked at it and he said the resort generated $3.8 billion in revenue last year, which is roughly $10.4 million a day. That's a lot of dough. That's a lot of money. And let's see. So that would mean, if you were to take that number, that 3.8 billion, that's over the course of 12 months. So you're taking 5 months off of that, and you would end up with about 2.2 billion, which that'd be if it was average, And so Disney is losing a lot of money, and so that would connect itself with the reason that Disney has had to lay off 28,000 employees. Because they've lost $2.2 billion. That is not, even for a company as big as Disney, that is not a small chunk of change. Yes, Disney is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, but $2.2 billion is nothing to sneeze at. Because that means that that's how much they've lost just on the parks, but there's other things also pulling away from that. So that's really the big reason that they've had to lay off 28,000 cast members. And so that kind of story like that, about all of their losses, has just kind of bleeds out into everything that's going on right now. And so, it's a little upsetting. But the good news is California, the governor of California, and some of the other higher up government people in California have now gone in and are talking to Disney and Universal, and they're going and touring the parks in hopes of figuring out how they will let Disneyland and Universal and the theme parks reopen. So that at least is a little bit of a light at the end of the the dark COVID-19 tunnel. So the second and final story, real quick, is just, it caught my eye because it just boggles my mind as to why this even happened. But guest brings AR-15 rifle and handgun to Disney's Polynesian Village Resort out of fear, as it has it in quotes, fear of local protests. And I guess it just boggles my mind because at no point is any sort of weapon allowed on Disney property. Like, if you're going to the park, there was somebody who tried to I think we covered the story a few weeks ago. There was somebody who tried to bring, I think, 2 handguns into Magic Kingdom. And guess what? They got arrested. It's like, I just don't understand this. And out of fear of protests, there aren't any protests around the Disney area. That's not where the protests are being held. The protests are being held in the city centers. I could see you trying to take a weapon with you if you were going into Orlando, going to be in Orlando somewhere at one of those hotels, in further towards the airport and stuff. But there's no protest going on over at Disney, and I don't get it. Let's see what this says. It says, while these situations are rare, thankfully, it seems a guest was recently caught with an AR-15 and a handgun. And they caught him as he was checking in. I mean, there's not really a good way, you can hide it, but there's not really a good way of hiding an AR-15. The man claimed that he was, quote unquote, worried for his family's safety due to social justice protests in Central Florida. So, oh boy. So the weapons in the man's baggage, because he had them in his baggage, he wasn't carrying them. They were discovered by one of the bellhops. Because the bellhop was wondering why the bags were so heavy. And then as soon as he discovered the guns, because he was wondering why they were so heavy, and they eventually figured out that it was because of guns, they contacted the Orange County Sheriff's Office to come and investigate. So he brought, let's see, what did he bring? He brought the rifle with a total of 3 rifle magazines with 90 rounds total, and 2 9mm magazines with 20 rounds each. Or no, total of 20 rounds, sorry. Total of 20 rounds. Oof. So what they ended up doing, looks like they didn't end up arresting the man. What they did instead was that Disney stored his guns through the end of his stay at the hotel's safe. The rifle was stored in the Animal Kingdom Lodge, and then they were given back to him when he left. And here's an important part. Guns or weapons of any kind are not allowed on Walt Disney World property, regardless of whether a guest has a permit or not, because this guy had a concealed carry permit, so he was allowed to conceal carry a weapon. And people tend to confuse things like this when going on to like Disney property or into a Walmart store or a Publix down in Florida or any other type of store, is that they'll carry their weapon inside or something like that, and whether you're at Disney or at Walmart or wherever, people will get all defensive if you tell them to leave because they have a weapon, or to go store their weapon in their car because they're not allowed to have the weapon on the property. People immediately jump to the idea that, oh, you're trotting on my rights, I have the right to carry a firearm. I have a concealed carry permit, so I have a right to carry a weapon. Yes, you do. But Disney World, Walmart, Publix, King Soopers, Target, McDonald's, Wendy's, all of those places like that, that is private property. They can make whatever rules they want. If they want to say that you are not allowed to conceal carry and you're not allowed to open carry, guess what? You can't carry there. You have to leave your weapon outside, or you can go somewhere else where they allow you to take the weapon in. And I don't know, I guess it just gets a little old for me hearing people make the same argument that, oh, I have the right to carry my weapon. Dude, you're on private property. Once you're on private property, you have to follow their rules. Even if you feel like it trods on your constitutional right to carry a weapon. You're on private property. They also have the right to tell you that you can't. Because that's not a right that's protected from when you're on private property. So, it's just, I don't know, this is just crazy to me. Again, he was going onto Disney World property. He was going from the airport straight to Disney property, where there's no protest at the airport and there's no protests on Walt Disney World property. So I don't know at what point he connected the dots. It just because it's Central Florida? I don't know. Just because it's Central Florida, he decided that wherever he was in Central Florida, there was going to be protests, I guess? I don't know. I don't know his train of thought. But regardless, don't take your weapons to Disney World. Don't do it. You don't need them. You don't need them at Disney World. I mean, if you're just getting random alien invasion, you're maybe sure. You might need them then. But is that going to happen? Most likely not. Like, oh. Okay, I'm done talking about that. So yeah, that was an interesting story. So, that's all I have for this week. I really hope that there's something more positive and just better in a lot of different ways than what I just had to go through. The story that I just had to cover. But it, like I said, it caught my eye and I was just super confused as to why it was even a thing. So, anyways, thank you all for joining me this week. And hopefully next week, our channel will be back to normal. We'll be back to posting on Tuesday and Thursday. We hope. We're in the midst of doing a complete clean out of Anna's parents' trailer. And so that's kind of what's been taking up our time this week. So hopefully next week we get back to normal. We're crossing our fingers. But thank you all for joining me this week. And until next week, don't forget to thank the Venetians.